I kind of couldn't believe that when we were talking about that the other day, that you like never slept all over in your car. How did that happen?
Have you met my parents?
I mean, were you like buckled in from the time you can, from the earliest you can remember?
I remember when there was a crackdown on seatbelts when they first started talking about seatbelt laws. Like before the seatbelt law was passed, where in the back seat you had to be buckled, like it was backseat kids first, right? And I remember we had a like beige or goldy colored Ford LTD. That was like our family car. And I
Nice.
remember it being a big deal, like that we had to be buckled in our seatbelts. And I mean, I was still in, I, I don't know how old I was, probably second grade.
So I
So
was thinking the seatbelt stuff didn't come till much later than that, really. And I don't even know if our cars had them in the back seat early
I don't remember having a car that didn't have seatbelts.
in the back.
Yeah.
Hmm. Well, we had some old ones, I guess,
Yeah.
but
Well,
we did have one station wagon. But after that, we had sedans.
yeah.
And you know that back window
Yeah.
that you see full of trash from
Uh
some
huh.
old cars? I would lay up on that back spot behind the back seats,
Wow.
looking out the window, or I'd be laying on the floor, or always just like laying sideways if I was alone, you know?
I think maybe I might remember laying on the floor, like we were going somewhere and had a bunch of stuff packed on the floor, like and laying on top of that, maybe. But, and my dad had this rule. So you said about old cars. His theory was he never wanted to drive a car that was older than 5 years old because that's when he really started having mechanical issues. Once a car hit 5 years old, that's when things started to break. That was and I think he got that from my grandpa, who was a mechanic at a Ford dealership. And my dad worked at a dealership before he graduated from college. And like, that was just his theory. So once a car hit 5 years old, boom, it was time for a new one.
Well, it's a nice plan if you can pull it off.
Yeah.
Nice to have new cars, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I thought it was like a universal thing of kids my age that we were just all over the car and roaming, but I guess you were a little more buckled in, huh?
Yes. We were definitely a little more buckled in. I mean, I remember some of my friends, like there was one family that lived down at the end of the street. They had twins that were in the same grade that I was. And I think we must have been in Girl Scouts together or something. And they had a big old station wagon. And so that was really my only station wagon experience was when we go on field trips and everybody would fight over who got to sit in the back because they had that back seat that faced out the rear. That was the best.
Well, you just reminded me of something. That wasn't your only station wagon
Oh,
experience.
that's true.
In college, when my car
Yeah.
exploded on the way to
Cedar Point.
Cedar Point,
Yeah.
we all jumped into Betcher's car.
Betcher's mom's car.
Yeah. So it was you and me in the back with
Taurus
coolers
wagon.
and everybody's bags and everything.
Yeah.
So that was much later. I don't know if that was technically legal either,
Oh, I'm sure it wasn't.
but side note to this with station wagons, have you ever seen Kath do that crazy spinny eye thing?
Yes.
Apparently she learned that in one of our station wagons laying out in the back that had a little sunroof in it.
Uh-huh.
And every time she went past a street light, she would make it go in quick circles.
Ooh,
But now it's like, I don't know how it doesn't hurt her head. I
right?
don't think she does as much anymore because it might. But
Yeah.
that's a crazy thing to see. Maybe I can get her to record it for us just to have
A visual.
a quick a quick visual of it.
Here's a quick reel of my sister having seizure
Yeah.
eyes. Uh, that's
Yeah.
funny.
Oh, it gives her a terrible headache, but we need to do it for the
For
real.
posterity.
That's right.
Need to document it. So funny. Welcome to Becoming Chicken Pot, a podcast about our family, past and present, for our family in the future.
We discuss family, marriage, faith, and all the things that made us chicken pot.
I love being chicken pot.
I do too.
It's one of my favorite things.
It's a great thing to hear from a little kid running through the house, isn't it?
Chicken pop?
Hmm.
Yeah. Mm,
Chick, can I have a snack?
yeah.
Pop, can I play on your computer?
Where Pop at? Every time he comes in the door. Even before he gets to the door. Like we pull in the driveway. Where Pop?
Well,
Because
part of that's because I now have to hide every time that he
you
comes
have to
in.
hide every time he comes over. Yep. He has to find you.
I'm running out of
I
spots.
know. He's getting pretty good at finding you.
So we're officially into season 2, and
Yeah.
this is episode 2 now.
Yeah.
We had our
S2E2.
semi surprise guest with Toby last weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, wasn't a surprise to us; it was a surprise to him after he came and realized he was on.
That was funny.
But it's good to catch him like that. But honestly, I half expect to have him show up like all of a sudden here,
Just
just
randomly.
hoping maybe he'll pop in again
Uh-huh.
because he's sneaky.
He is the
He is
sneakiest.
very sneaky.
Yeah. He's definitely like the covert ops member of our family. Has
Hmm.
been since he was a toddler. The sneakiest kid.
Yep, you having a conversation, all of a sudden you realize, hey,
Oh, Toby's like
Toby's
right
right
there.
there. Don't talk about Toby. He will hear it.
Uh,
He's like that. He's like the guy from Mr. Deeds
yeah.
that always shows up, says, "May I touch your feet?" Very, very sneaky.
The same guy who's on one of our newer shows that we're enjoying, Severance.
Yep. I was wondering if you made that
I
connection.
sure did.
Well, it was fun having him on here, and I mean,
There's more to come.
I enjoyed the time just talking nonsense with him. I haven't produced that one yet, so I don't know what all we covered, what all we're going to cut,
We'll
but
save
it
some
was
of it
fun.
for future episodes because there's some nuggets in there for sure.
We did know staring at each other for 20 minutes, like we could do,
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't translate well to the podcast, so we skipped that part.
That's true.
We'll cut that out.
Yep.
But I enjoy it.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I think we inadvertently touched on some, but one of our weekly things, anything that made you laugh, cry, smile this week?
Well, I think we were actually having a conversation last night that I thought would be fun to pull in here today. And I think, for me, it's about being on the same page about what is and is not romantic within our relationship. So yesterday was Valentine's Day, which, uh, if you get really into Valentine's Day, great, but it's a Hallmark holiday. And I think my perspective is it's a lot of contrived pressure to force some type of romantic gestures that people feel a lot of pressure around.
And
And
depending on the phase of your relationship, either depth wise or just straight time,
yeah,
it's a lot of
it
pressure,
is.
you know?
Ugh. I'm glad we don't put that kind of pressure on each other at this point in our relationship, but it was a really good day.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, we enjoy being around each other pretty much all the time. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we like to do some special things now and then, but
But it doesn't have to be because it's
it
a
doesn't have
certain
to be on the
day.
14th and we don't have to wait for that day.
Right. We just do it
So,
when we want.
I think it was several years ago we kind of made that agreement
Yeah.
that let's not put all this pressure
Right?
on this day.
On a day, not just
We
Valentine's Day, just any particular given day.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean that's a big one that's kind of thrown on you. What'd you do for Valentine's Day?
Right.
We kind of looped it in with New Year's Eve also.
Yeah.
There's like pressure on that one. We have another story for that one sometime later. But
Uh,
we felt that pressure way back
yeah.
and so we kind of grouped the two of those together.
Yeah.
No pressure days.
Should we
It's
share
just us.
what our Valentine's Day looked like for everyone?
It's pretty crazy, but yeah, go ahead.
I mean, it was Friday, so we both, it was a work day, whatever. And then I think you originally had planned to play tennis and asked me to either convince you to go or talk you out of it because you really didn't want to go. So we decided we went to the mall and we were going to walk just to walk around and, get out of the house and get some steps in. And I wanted to look for some shoes. We wound up not buying me shoes, buying shoes for Miles. And then we were like, well, let's just see what the food court has. So we walked through Dick's Sporting Goods through the food court at good old Meridian Mall and saw Sbarro. And we're like, oh, we should just get Sbarro while we're here because the only time you get Sbarro is when you're at the mall. And by the time we were making our way out, it looked like Sbarro's food had been sitting there since 11 a.m.,
Mhm.
which was a total turnoff.
It looks like the pizza we'll pull out of the fridge later for lunch. It's
Oh,
pretty gross.
yeah.
What's my favorite name of the one place in there, though?
Yum Japan.
It's so perfectly obvious. It makes me laugh, but then it's like, you cannot mistake what that restaurant is. Yum, Japan.
Yeah. Oh, but then we
Yeah,
were
it's
both
getting a little sad in that
I know, it's
whole chunk of the
crazy.
mall.
There's as many, like, empty storefronts as there are storefronts, and there's only 3 shoe stores in the mall. Do you remember when there used to be, like, 8? It's crazy.
Yes, we're gonna take you to your fancy place where they measure your feet
Yeah, we're
and
gonna
fit
go to
you later today,
Playmakers.
Jody.
Yep. Anyway, so we picked up pizza on our way home, and because we were both like, "Oh, pizza sounds good," and Sbarro disappointed, so, like, we came home and we watched some shows and chilled out, and we were both so happy with that evening.
Mhm.
It was great.
Well, you had your romantic gestures where you got us some special dessert
Oh, I did, yes.
and you let me get Domino's because you don't generally love that.
Yeah. True, true, true. Oh, and I got us some date night scratch-off cards. Like, for those date nights where we're like, "I don't know what we should do."
Oh, yeah. This will
Remember?
be fun.
Yeah. We'll see. We haven't scratched any off yet, so we'll see what they say.
Yeah.
Stay tuned on that.
None of them better say, like, take a 2-mile jog together or,
Ugh.
or worse.
Or
Am I
worse.
right?
Yes, you are right. Oh. But it was a good day. It was a very us kind of day, and I am very happy with it.
Mhm.
And I enjoyed just being with you and hanging out.
And again, just remembering that we had taken the pressure off it, it just made it so relaxing in us. So we loved it.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I think that kinda covers our laugh smile there for this week.
Yeah,
Hit that one hard.
yeah,
So, you wanna you wanna jump right into kind of the topic of this one you were looking at?
yeah. So, I think I was actually inspired. I was inspired at church. Was it last week or the week before about marriage and covenant relationships? And so anyway, I was kind of inspired the idea of, marriage and what a covenant agreement is. And marriage is one of those covenant agreements and was really thinking about marriage and wanting to do some deeper dives into marriage, our experience, perspective, wisdom, take it for what you will. So I thought one of the themes that we could talk about today in particular was what advice would we give to our younger selves? We've got 31 and a half years of marriage in. We've been together for 34 years, basically. So, what kind of things do we wish we could go back and tell our younger selves?
Yeah, you threw me there on the word advice because I hesitate to, like, bullet point things out like that. Like, do this, do this, do this.
Yeah.
But we're just kinda
What do
looking
we
at,
wish we would have known
as
then?
we usually do on this podcast, we're just looking at things we've been through.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think one of the things that I was thinking about was if we could go back to that time when we were newlyweds, right? Or maybe even pre marriage, thinking about marriage, that newlywed phase. ugh, What do we wish we would have known then? What might have helped take some of the pressure off? Like the expectations. I feel like so many couples go into marriage, especially when you're married young, because we were married really young, right? we didn't have years and years of adult life experience under our belts when we got married,
Mhm.
right? We were growing up together, basically. I was 18 when we met, 19, not even, it's a week before my 19th birthday when we started dating. So we really grew up together in a lot of ways. And I think young couples in particular, they have a lot of expectations of marriage and relationships that can be unrealistic, and they put just so much unnecessary pressure on the individuals and on the relationship. I definitely feel like we did that, you know? And I think part of it was the culture that we were in at the time. There was a lot of expectations on marriage and relationships and what they should and shouldn't look like. And
Mm,
I wish I would have known then that so many things were less important than I thought they were, right? Like things like where we lived and the cars that we drove, and like those are not the important things in life, right? Like just
mhm.
some of those things, the material things are so much less important than you think they are.
Yeah, and I think mine that's kind of a overarching theme of everything I might come up with on this topic
Mhm.
is the way overused cliche of "this too shall pass,"
Yeah.
whether bad or good,
Yes.
um, because I could really get hung up on what was happening now or what I
Yes.
thought might be happening, and I know it just comes with age and experience and getting through things, but I mean, I'm still learning to practice it
Mhm.
correctly, but just that this is going away in a week. I'm
Yeah.
not gonna be worried about this in a week. Try to remember that.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was not good at that
No.
early in our
No,
marriage.
you could get hung
I
up on
could
that.
stew and hang up on stuff
Yes.
a long time.
Yeah. Oh, one of the things that I wish I would have known, especially in those early years, is that we didn't have to say yes to everything other people asked of us. We didn't have to say yes to every invitation. We didn't have to say yes to everything that was asked that we do and volunteer for and take responsibility for. Like, we should have, in hindsight, given ourselves permission to say no. And I don't feel like we felt like we could say no.
I think there's some people that recommend it and maybe some cultures that require it
Yeah.
where you really don't do anything that
That first
first
year of
year or so
marriage.
of
Yeah.
marriage.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, no regrets on this looking back.
Mm-hmm.
I never want to give that
Right.
impression,
Yes.
but we were basically doing our youth group before we were married.
Oh, we 100%
So
were.
we were a couple trying to figure everything out as
We
kids,
were college
a few years
students
older than
leading high school ministry.
yeah. So I would not recommend that
Yeah.
ever again to
Mhm.
someone, but
Mhm.
to your to your point of saying yes to too many things,
Yeah.
it wasn't really a question most of the time, honestly.
It
It was an
wasn't. It was just an
expectation.
expectation that we felt like we had to meet.
So, I mean, it was that being part of the church and a group of our friends that were all at that age.
Yep.
And part 2, kind of my mom was like, "Oh, well, we're old enough now, it's your turn." So we would get
Yeah.
scooted into things
Yeah.
in their place also.
Yeah.
So I don't wanna go down that trail too much, but as explanation, too much involvement outside of our marriage the first
Yes.
year.
Well, and so let's remind everybody what our first year of marriage looked like. So we were married in August 1993, and we, as you said, so we were involved in youth ministry, which was a weekly commitment, and we were planning monthly activities, right, for junior high, high school students and coordinating all of that. I think that we were involved in Sunday school, in a young marrieds group. Those were church commitments. And then you were driving back and forth to Mount Pleasant every day. So you were gone from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. every day. And then for 1 month every quarter, you were gone until 9:30 at night. You worked late. I mean, you were gone a lot.
Couple weeks anyway. But
Yeah,
yeah, it was there was no option for working at home at the time.
right.
So you
So
had to be on site.
I was still in college. I was finishing my last year of college and I was working. So both of those things on top of the things we were doing as a couple, and then there were family commitments, and we were newlyweds. And then we found out in the end of January, 1st of February of 94 that Zach was on his way. We had Zach 13 months after we got married. So we were pregnant our first year of marriage while I was still in school, while I was working, while you were working 75 miles away, and we had all of these other responsibilities. That's a lot. That's a lot
Hmm.
for newlyweds, right? So, yes, I wish that we would have said no to more things and taken some of that unnecessary pressure off of ourselves, you know?
Well, and then we were, yeah, like you said, we were still doing that stuff after Zach was born
Yeah.
for probably another couple years.
Oh, we were still doing it when Toby was
When
born.
Toby was born,
Yeah.
and that was way too long.
Yeah.
There was, I mean, that's when we finally decided to step away from that. It was there was too much resentment of
Yeah.
our time for
Mhm.
doing that, and that was no place for our head to be for people that were in that position.
Right.
So
Yeah. One of the other things I think that I wish that or I guess that I would share with my younger self is, you know, the importance of choosing the attitude that I wanted to carry forth. And that's a personal thing, but I think it's also a relationship thing, right? It's like, how do I want to show up today? How do I want to show up this week for my spouse, for my kids, for the people that I'm interacting with? And I feel like at the time, I don't even think we realized how overwhelming the amount of things that we had on our plates were. In hindsight, obviously, everything is much clearer. And I wish that I would have been more patient, that I would have shown more grace, not just with other people, but with myself. I wasn't kind to myself.
so your nutshell, your advice on that one again is
Choose the way that you want to show up. How do you want to show up for people on a daily basis?
okay.
Are you going to practice patience? Are you going to set aside your anxiety? Are you going to realize when you're overwhelmed and then think through like, do I need to be overwhelmed by this? What do I actually need to do today? What is mine to do? Learning to recognize those things so that you can really show up the way that you want to for the people in your life.
Kind of related to that. It just kind of made me smile because we see him doing the same thing with Miles right now, but how well that in theory worked
Mhm.
with Zach
Oh, yeah.
when he was a kid.
Yeah.
Well, the way I remember the story mostly though
Mhm.
is when we were in the car
Yeah.
and you would tell him to take his attitude and throw it out the window.
Yeah.
So he would like
Put his hand up to
talk
his
or
mouth.
like air spit into his hand
Uh-huh.
and then throw it out the window. And then he was different.
He was.
It's like he really threw it out.
Like the physical action of that shift, I'm telling you, in toddlers, it really works. When we were at home, he would take it, run to the back door, and throw it out the door.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we talk about that one, but you know who the one of the most amazing versions of that I've ever seen is?
Mm.
Toby.
Mm.
Because there was a stretch of
Yeah.
time,
There.
especially
Yeah.
when he was struggling with his academic stuff,
Mm-hmm.
he would spiral and he would spin
Yes.
and he'd either go off on his own or he would actually get kind of abrasive
Uh-huh.
and verbal.
Yeah.
And I wish that we could claim teaching him how this happened, that you could teach it to other people.
Mm-hmm.
But there came a point where he just decided it was enough and he would catch himself doing that and literally just shake his body like he was shaking it off,
Mhm.
and then he'd like be okay, moving on.
Yeah.
And I could not believe how he did that at such a young age.
Yeah. And
That's
this is
incredible.
like probably 2nd or 3rd grade.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
I mean, if he could bottle that,
Yeah.
write a book, man,
Yeah.
that would be amazing.
Mhm.
I have never been able to do it, and I still can't.
You're much better at it now.
You think?
Yeah.
Because I mean, I've always had days or weekends where I'll just wake up and I'm grumpy, and I don't really know why.
Yeah. You shake it
And it
off much faster now than you
think
used
so?
to. Yeah,
Okay,
for
well,
sure.
that's good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
But that I'm gonna go ahead and say that was a challenge early on
Yeah. Well, I
because
also think you're much better at recognizing it now. I don't think you always recognized it in your younger years.
could be.
Yeah. And then you'd get annoyed at me if I pointed out. You're like, "No, I'm not. I'm fine. I'm fine." I'm like, "No, you're not."
Yeah. Well, that's just kind of a guy thing too, I think.
Yeah.
I'm fine. It's
Mm.
good. Whatever.
Mhm. So, do you have what are some of your biggest lessons that you've learned or fears from our early years? What kind of things stand out to you?
I think it's funny when you first asked me that because I think to a fault I didn't have any fear.
Mm,
Like it was a ignorant bliss
yeah.
for because I
We
mean I've
did have a large measure of ignorant bliss. I will say that. I
yeah.
agree.
I mean the not so much the fact that we got married, but I didn't really have a good job yet.
Yeah.
Um I was still working the job I worked all through high school and
Yeah, when we
college,
first got married.
first got married.
Yeah.
And then we've covered this before, but then I took another job that was didn't pay anything, and that's the one that was 75 miles away,
Well, it was better, but not much better.
just barely.
Yeah.
So that we're in that situation, and then we decided we really wanted to start our
Let's have a
family.
baby. Yeah.
And, financially, it's just the worst thing we could have done. But the kid that came out was the best thing we could have done.
Best thing.
So,
No regrets.
um, yeah. So, uh, I mean, I have to look at that and think you were just dumb and you weren't afraid of anything and getting married at the time. Let's do it.
Yeah.
So I really can't think of a fear. How about you?
Um, there were so many things going on, I think, for me. And so I think if think about a fear, I think my fear was probably honestly that I wouldn't be enough.
Mm.
There was, I felt the weight and a lot of responsibility to be a lot of things to a lot of different people, and that I wasn't sure that I could be enough for any one of those things. So, whether that was being a good wife, a good mother, a good daughter, a good youth group leader, a good deaconess, a good whatever, a good friend, like, I think that was my fear that I wouldn't be able to meet the obligations, the expectations of everyone around me.
Well, hopefully not trying to sound like a therapist, but we've talked about this. You didn't get much of that from your dad.
Yeah.
So you had an aunt and an uncle that kind of gave you that encouragement,
Yep.
but from the man in your life, you didn't really get much of that. So
Yeah.
you were probably worried
Yeah.
if you were enough for me, if I thought you were
Yeah.
great
Yeah.
and awesome.
And
He told you this much later in
yes,
life. You just didn't
100%.
get it at that point in your life. So
Yeah.
it was a tough
Yeah. Yeah.
transition.
Well, and I will say you you were never discouraging to me in any way, but I think it took you a while to realize that one of my love languages, and I think this is fairly true for women in general, is we need the affirmation. We need the praise. We need the encouragement the same way men do. I mean, men need it actually, I think more than women sometimes. But like you weren't profusely appreciative, like verbally, right? And I think, yeah, I mean, there's a reason behind that too. Your mom wanted it all the time. And so you learned to withhold it in rebellion, right? Like, I mean, that's really what it was. It wasn't that you didn't appreciate me. It wasn't that you didn't love me. It wasn't that anything like that. It was just like, it didn't occur to you that you needed to speak these things,
Hmm.
And you've gotten, I mean, so much better,
Well, and
night
we've
and
just
day. And it's practice.
we kind of touched on this a minute ago when we've touched on it in other episodes that compare your need slash desire want for some of that verbal approval,
Yeah.
pair that with my sulken silences,
Yes.
and you're gonna think what you want, whether
Right.
I'm thinking it or not. So
Yes.
that was a that was
Well, you
a
fill the
terrible
void,
combination back
right?
then.
So if I'm not getting that kind of encouragement, verbal, whatever, my head's going to fill the void. So if you're
Hmm.
not giving me the narrative, I'm going to create my own, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Yeah. I think that was my fear. Yeah. And and I will say, I'm at the point in my life where I don't have those fears anymore, which is a
Good.
great
Me
place to
either. And
be.
I was gonna say you have always been like very intentional about building me up
Mm.
and encouraging me, and I've always appreciated that. So
Well, thank you.
thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I wish I could have been more verbal early on. Now you can't stop me from yapping, can you?
I know. Look at you go.
Yep.
You're always telling me how awesome I am.
I think I am.
You do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another point that I want to make, and it's something that it's kind of a core value, I think, that I've come to realize in probably the last 10 years or so. This is like really a core value for me across life in general. It applies to everything. And it's the idea that everything is relationship first. Doesn't matter if you're talking about your spouse, your children, at, work, like people first, right? And the way that you treat people, the way that you enter a relationship, the expectations, the way you honor those relationships, it's more important than the other things in life, right? And so in a marriage, what are you doing to choose your spouse over the other things in life? How are you prioritizing that relationship? Right? So if I could go back to our younger selves, and it's not that I don't think that we prioritized our marriage or our relationship. I just think I would say this is more important than showing up at church on a Sunday night, right? Like if you need that time to spend together and invest in your relationship, that's your first priority. Than showing up to teach toddlers for an hour. Not that that's not important work, but again, your marriage is a higher priority, right? And so it's like, how are you choosing your relationship and prioritizing that? I wish I would have had more perspective on that when I was younger.
I think we're arguing that it's more important in those earlier days.
Yes,
Like
because there's so many, life is so
we can
busy.
fudge more of that stuff right now
Yeah,
because we have a little more of the time
yeah.
and the kids aren't at home. Um, but yeah, early on,
Hmm.
those choices are big.
Well, and I think the reason is when your relationship is strong, when you have that foundation, everything else is so much easier. Conflict is so much easier. Dealing with sick kids when you have a strong relationship and you feel like you have each other's back, like it's so much easier. When you have sick parents and you have a solid relationship, you know you can count on your partner, so much easier, right? Like,
So, are you saying that one person has to clean up the fries that were puked from the top bunk, and the other person has to stay away?
I'm saying one person has to attend to the sick child and bathe the puke off of them while the other one cleans up french fries that were puked over the side of a loft bed. Yes, that's what I'm saying.
That's just one of those goofy agreements we ended up with early on because if you walked in on it, you'd, "Oh, oh."
And yet I scooped up the puke-covered child and dealt with that. So it wasn't that I wasn't dealing with the puke.
I didn't say you weren't. I was saying we
Okay.
dealt with it differently.
Okay. You with a spoon and a bowl,
Early
scraping it off the carpet.
early agreements and contracts, verbal contracts.
That's right. You clean up the puke and you order the pizza.
Yep.
Was your 2
Oh, yeah, that was a big
responsibilities
one.
in marriage. Um, I think the other thing that I really, really wish I would have been open to earlier in life was having the hard conversations. Don't put it off. It's gonna hurt, it's gonna be painful, you're not gonna like it, but have the hard conversations when you need to have the hard conversations. Like, I think we spent a lot of time in our early years avoiding the hard conversations, and that was not a healthy thing.
I think you always knew it. You just couldn't get me on board,
Yeah.
but I am now.
Yeah.
Have been for quite a while, I think,
Yes.
because
Yes.
we figured out things were over so much quicker.
So much. Yeah. And I'm talking about these are the early years, like the first 5 years or so, whatever, but yeah, have the hard conversations. It's gonna suck, but just have the hard conversation and be over it. Like the more you let it go, the more it festers, the bigger it becomes, the more entangled it is. Like just say, you know what? We need to have a hard conversation. Let's set some time. Let's put the kids to bed. Let's just have it out, whatever it is.
Yep. Well, I would say that is a straight up advice thing that I have no
Yeah.
problem giving.
Mhm. I think it's about like in those hard conversations, like you have to come into those hard conversations with brutal honesty. You've got to be willing to own your own mistakes, own your own weaknesses. It's not about casting judgment on the other one. It's showing up and owning your part in whatever the situation is. You have to come into it with that perspective.
Or just letting me know what my part was in it. I mean, not just your own. You got to let the other person know what's
Right.
bugging you.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I think for me too, the other part of that I was not good at, that's always been a struggle for me is when to ask for help. When I'm just in over my head and when to just be like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I need you to do this. Or I need you to step in and help me deal with X, Y, and Z. Or I just need you to do this because I am not the right person for this, you know?
I was going to say it's very rarely physical task related things you need help
Right,
with.
right, right.
It's brain space you need help with.
Yes,
You can't just be thinking about it anymore.
right. One other thing that I wanted to touch on, and it came from so this year, one of the things that you started doing when you talk about let's take this all the way back to romance and what how people define that romance is you got this daily calendar that are these kind of romantic puns, right? And so you've been leaving these little tear sheets in the bathroom for me in different places every morning, which is so sweet.
I'd say they're barely romantic other than the fact that I'm thinking about you every morning. They're mostly just dumb.
But one of them that showed up in the last week, it said its message was, "Don't hurry, be happy." And I read that and it really stuck me, like and I mean, like, stuck me like, "Ooh, ouch." It kinda hurt a little bit because I realize one of my weaknesses is I I sometimes feel like I always need to be in a hurry. On to the next thing. Like, we need to hurry up and get out the door. We need to hurry up and do this. I need to hurry through life. And why do I need to hurry? And when I'm in a hurry all the time, I'm missing out on so much. Like, if I'm hurrying through instead of soaking it in, I'm missing out on so much goodness. And I just felt like there was so much truth in that. Like, just slow down, soak it in. That's where you're going to find your happiness. It's not through the hustle and bustle that you're going to be happy, right? Like,
I think,
slow down.
I mean, you've started before this, but in the last 3 years,
Yeah.
Miles has been really good for you in that regard
Yes. Yeah.
of just sit down and play the game.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the food or the kitchen at
Mhm.
that point.
Mhm. Don't
Just
worry
be there
about the
for him.
mess, just be in the moment.
Mhm.
And it's so weird, so I was looking at my, like, my camera roll on my phone this week because I was gonna update the shared album that feeds our TV, like, when the screensaver goes on. It's a bunch of pictures of family and stuff like that. So I was gonna go in and update that. I do it every couple months, and I didn't really have that many photos, like, of Miles and, like, family time, and I think it's because I just consciously try not to have that in my hand all the time. Like, I wanna have the real moments with him rather than worry about capturing them on film. Like,
Mhm.
I'd rather have the memories than, like, the actual documentation.
You don't need a selfie of every moment you spend with
Yeah.
him.
Yeah. I don't need it blasted all over social media, you know?
On the flip side, I have lots of pictures for you.
You do.
I just need to share those a little more with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. So anyway, don't hurry, be happy. That was kind of one of my key takeaways, I think, that's been stuck with me.
They're pretty bad.
They're really cheesy puns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking about you, Jode.
Thanks. You know, I think something I have a story, kind of like from those early years that I wanted to share that I think speaks to something that you were touching on earlier. And, this was probably second year of marriage because Zach was a baby, right? And you were still working in Mount Pleasant, and it was a Saturday morning, and you went through this season of it was the winter. Zach was a baby, so he was probably 3, 4, 5 months old. And Saturday mornings, inevitably, you were in bed with a migraine. Do you remember?
Yeah, it was like a push, push, push all week and let down.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember very distinctly, it was a Saturday morning and you were sick in bed. And like it was into the early afternoon. And I remember like feeling just disappointed, a little frustrated, like, I only had so much time with you during the week. Zach only had so much time with you during the week, and you were sick in bed with a headache, right? And so I was like, oh man. And I remember changing Zach, and he was smiling and, like being adorable. He was the cutest baby and like having a moment. And I was like, wow, like, look at how perfect this kid is. And I still get this time, and I'm only gonna have this for a short time. Like, look at how much he's grown in 4 months and how much he's changed. Like, this is really just a very finite period of time in our lives that are gonna be long and amazing. Like, this is a season of life, and it's gonna be really short. So, I'm not gonna waste it being frustrated because you had a headache. Like, I'm gonna take it for what it is, and I'm gonna make the most out of it. And I think so it goes back to kind of what you were speaking to, like, there are seasons in our lives, and we need to remember, like, it's the "this too shall pass," right? This is only a time, and it's gonna be gone before we know it. Like, you're going to get through this. Things are going to change. They're going to continue to evolve. You're gonna grow. So, anyway, that was kind of one of those memories from the early years that I clearly remember that shift in my thinking, like, "Oh."
Well, I hope he doesn't feel like I missed his childhood. Because I really don't think I did. I know we were he and I were very close before Toby showed up. Um, but no, I mean, the headaches were a bigger problem than just Saturday morning. But
Yes.
I understand where you're talking about those
Yeah.
times where I
It
was
was like a
home, but
month or 6 weeks or whatever. You went through just like
mhm.
Saturdays, you had the crash from the week where you had headaches.
But I still got him all the time
You
then.
did.
Also, it was a bigger issue
It was.
that well, let's let's just take a minute. I inherited high blood pressure.
Yeah.
and realized I had it all through basically my childhood, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Because once we got that kind of in check,
Yeah.
the headaches basically went away.
Yeah.
I haven't had bad headaches in 20 years.
Yeah.
So grateful and thankful for that we figured
Mhm.
it out.
Mhm.
But again, it sucks that it happened when Zach was a baby. But
Well, and it wasn't Zach's entire childhood. You didn't miss
mhm,
his childhood in any way, shape, or form. Like I said, it was like 4 to 6 weeks on a Saturday, and you're usually fine by like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever. You'd take a shower, we'd go do something, like, it was fine. So, Zach in no way thinks you missed his childhood. Like you said, you guys were very tight, um, and still are.
I had a memory, a very early memory, which is just kind of something we're doing now, I think,
Yeah.
that certainly wasn't as deep or profound as that. But I was just thinking about I made the joke about till Toby came along just a minute
Yeah.
ago, which if you know us is not the truth at all. I love both kids to death and
Uh-huh.
I love being with both of them. But when Toby was born,
Yeah.
it was a recurring thing with Zach where he would like pull on my shirt or leg and say, "Give the baby to mom. Give the baby to mom so we can play." And it was over and over that
Uh-huh.
happened.
Yeah.
Is that how he said it? Or was it like,
Yeah.
give it to mom?
No, he would say the baby. Yeah,
Okay.
he would. Well, and it was so I mean, it was so cute. So Zach was 3. He was 3 and 4 weeks to the day when Toby was born. So he was that very energetic, physical little boy stage, and he wanted to play hockey. We had little hockey sticks and goals, like, out on the porch. We had his Little Tikes basketball hoop. You guys would play tackle down basketball, like, he wanted all the physical things, and I had literally just had a baby. I was not the one that was,
Mhm.
in shape to do that at that point. And you took the whole week off after Toby was born. So you were home and you and Zach did your thing while I was recovering from childbirth and teaching Toby how to eat and kind of all the things, And yeah, that was like, give the baby to mom. Let's go play tackle down basketball. Let's go play hockey.
I mean, Zach was really my bud for a long time there because I was thinking about this earlier. I resisted when you were talking about when we were first married
Yeah.
and shortly after that Zach came along. I think I just resisted adulting, conversationally and
Mm.
socially for a
Mhm.
long time.
Mhm.
And Zach was my escape.
Yeah.
We'd go to family events
It's
or
true.
anything. We'd bring a ball, bring our gloves. We were outside playing.
Yeah.
And then I didn't have to deal with conversation. I didn't have to talk. I could just be off playing with Zach, you know.
You're
It
finally admitting it.
it looked like I was
The best dad ever.
being an attentive dad,
Yeah.
and I was. I
Yes.
thoroughly enjoyed it,
Yeah.
but I was happy staying out of the deep conversations and just all that stuff.
Mhm. Mhm. Oh, you were a great dad. You are a great dad, and you're an even better pop.
You were obviously a great mom and a
Mm.
great chick.
Anything else you wanna leave, our fives of listeners with from our early years of marriage?
From this topic.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but you had asked me at one point what are the things that stressed me out.
Mm.
I mean, we already covered that I didn't have the healthy fear I should have, maybe.
Yeah.
But just in terms of stress, it was, name the usuals: money,
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
job, career,
Yeah.
marriage, list them off. And it took a while to get over that.
Yeah.
I mean, some of it was just avoiding actions that we took that had natural consequences. When
Mhm.
you're talking deadlines,
Mhm.
you know, putting things off is going to wreck you.
Right.
Being terrible with our money is
Mhm.
gonna wreck you.
Mhm.
Stresses we brought on ourselves,
Yeah.
that we got over a lot of those,
Yeah.
but even if we didn't, they're 30 years ago,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
And if I could have had that perspective then of even that was a year ago, that was 5 years ago,
Right.
which is what is helping me now.
Yeah.
And again, the short answer to that is what stressed me out then? Everything.
I think the other thing that maybe we didn't mention was, well, and maybe we did in a roundabout kind of way, but let me say it explicitly. It was we didn't know how or were afraid to set boundaries. Set boundaries with other people's expectations, set boundaries with your parents, set boundaries about, yeah, I think it was like we didn't know how to set boundaries then. And I mean, and we've talked a little bit about this, but living next door to your parents, your mom didn't have many boundaries, and we eventually like kind of learned to navigate that a little bit, but when our kids were really really little, she wanted to almost take on the role of parent in some ways to our children, that were very uncomfortable for me. So, boundaries.
Well, I think we covered a lot there. Should we move on to something a little more fun
Let's do
at
it.
this point?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, first of all, in our slice of life thing,
Yeah.
plans for today?
Um, all of them or just the highlights?
Let's just hit the big highlight. Uh, we were planning on potentially going to the aquarium
Yeah.
over towards Detroit area
Yeah.
with Miles and the kids today, but
We're
it
under a
is
winter weather advisory.
threatening weather at any time today.
Yeah.
So keeping it close to home. So it looks like we may go bowling today.
Yeah. That'll be a fun adventure.
Something we rarely do, but I'm sure Miles will love it.
Toddler bowling.
Yep. So that's our big plan. And we gotta get some shoes.
Yeah.
Don't forget that.
Yep.
Um, what are you reading or listening to this week?
Oh, well, I don't know. I just finished kind of a series, the Kindred Curse saga, which I really enjoyed, and got to the end of the third book, and it said book 4 being released spring 2024. So I was like, great. Look for it in the Amazon Kindle store. It's nowhere. Then I have to go to Google and start Googling it. The book still hasn't been released. It's February 2025, people. This book was promised almost a year ago. When is it going to be released?
I enjoyed watching you swipe through your phone up in the air as you were whipping through the Kindle store.
That's right. Anyway,
Aren't these new mics great that you can just go
I can
crazy
be
with your hands
hands
over there?
free. I can talk with my hands. Fantastic.
Communicating so much better, Jody.
Right? I don't feel restricted. How about you?
Oh, I've kind of been all over the place. What usually happens with me with music is I'm listening to my big, huge Tim Likes playlist and
Mm-hmm.
something will stick and then I jump into that artist. And this week or so it's been Colony House.
Yeah.
And I have a whole playlist of just them. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll just hit that on shuffle.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Punk kids, they're great writers and musicians and
They're not kids anymore.
no, they're not. Well,
They're older than our
they are to
kids.
me.
I know. Speaking of Colony House, can I jump in here for a minute? Shelby and I were talking, I think, last weekend, and we were talking about, both of us have been like, okay, the next time Maverick City's in Michigan, we just have to go see them. So we were talking about kind of Christian music and that kind of thing. I was like, man, I wonder if they do any festivals. She's like, well, we don't have any like Christian festivals in Michigan. I'm like, no, we actually do. So I started looking them up, and one of them that they have every year is in Muskegon. So I happened to see this summer, Stephen Curtis Chapman is going to be at this music festival in Muskegon in August. Stephen Curtis is the father to the two founders of Colony House. So anyway, little tie in there.
Wondering how that was a speaking of moment, but you brought it back together.
I did. I did.
All right.
Yeah.
Nicely done. In terms of reading,
Mm-hmm.
um, again at our church a few weeks ago, we've had some guest speakers here for a little stint. Mark taking a break, I guess. His old pastor from way back
Mm-hmm.
at Trinity, Emerson Eggerichs, he
Mm-hmm.
was at our church preaching that day, and also kind of a little plug for his new book.
Yeah.
So it was all very interesting. So um, they were giving them out in the back. I'm going to make this story longer than it has to be.
Mm-hmm.
Giving some out in the back of the
Copies of his
auditorium.
book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I grabbed one on the way out, and a couple nights later, I had it by my bedstand. I settled all in like I was getting ready to read it, and I opened it up, and Jody heard me go, "Nope." It's the tiniest type in that
It
thing
is
I've
the
ever seen.
tiniest type.
And I had to make sure I wasn't just being old.
Yes.
So I showed it to you, and you're like, "Oh, yeah, I can't read that."
Yeah. Well, I didn't have my contacts in, so I definitely couldn't.
Yeah.
Mm.
And, I mean, he's older than us for sure.
Oh my,
So,
yes. He's like my mom's age, for
yeah.
sure.
Your mom's age.
Yeah.
So old. She's gonna love that.
Stop. Anyway, but you downloaded on Kindle.
I did.
Yeah.
And it's called, Living Above the Bar,
Yeah.
and it's all very good. I mean, he covered a lot of it that day on that Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
So it made me want to dig in a little bit more, and
Yeah.
it's interesting. I'm sure you'll like to read it too.
I will.
But it's one of those where you open it thinking, I'm hoping maybe this will make me feel good about myself or not good about myself. So it's kind of a mix of both, which
Okay.
is probably a great way to read
It
something.
should be a little challenging, right?
Yep.
All right. Any other words of wisdom, final thoughts before we wrap up?
I don't think so. You? Oh, I just bit my tongue. Give me something to punch.
How's your hand? So, one thing you should know about Tim is there's two things that make him really angry in life. Number one, when he bites his cheek. Number two, when he bites his tongue. And
Oh, the
it's
boys will tell you number 3.
what's number three?
It's one of those things that has stuck in their mind forever. When a file crashes on me
Oh,
after I've been
yes.
working on it for an hour.
Yeah, and it isn't saved.
So they're always like, "Here comes the glasses throw."
Yeah, you did throw your glasses.
Because that one time it happened,
Uh-huh.
I grabbed them and chucked them across the room.
Yep, I do remember that. Yeah, it's the only time you really ever get angry. But yeah, we were driving down the road a week or so ago, and I think you bit your cheek, and you punched the steering wheel.
Mhm.
And I had to try so hard not to laugh because for some reason, when you get angry like that, it just makes me laugh because it's so out of character for you to react in that way. It's so completely out of character. And literally the only time you do it is when you bite your tongue or your cheek. Like,
Mhm.
it's crazy. And
But I don't think I'm alone. I was very validated in an episode of The Office where Jim kept biting his lip.
Yeah.
And eventually he pounded the table and said, "I'm going home," in the middle of the day. And I get it.
Oh, it just happens to you way more often than most people, I think. All right. Well, now you know something new about Tim Bepler. You're
Yeah,
welcome.
that was a freebie.
Mm-hmm. All right. Good episode. Future fam, in case you listen to this someday and we've never met,
We love you.